Wow, what an episode that was, Joel. We just got off speaking with Knut, and it was a fascinating talk. Wow, I'm pumped up, Joel, after that.
I mean, the one thing I had was our categories on Apple Podcasts, I'm getting now technical, are philosophy,
Right.
culture, and I think personal stories, something along those lines. You can choose up to like 3 categories and subcategories.
Mm.
And I thought the whole time, this is the perfect episode to describe this, because what I find
Yeah,
brilliant
yeah.
about Knut is he is a maxi. So he's a proper Bitcoin maxi, but he's not a
Mm.
toxic one. He's not.
Yeah.
And what I mean, guys, by toxic is he's not judging people online. He's not like
Yeah,
bashing
it's not say
them.
go fuck yourself and all this sort of
Exactly.
stuff. Absolutely
He
not, no.
he likes the F-bomb. I like that. He dropped it a few times. But he's authentic, and he's like, if you are part of Bitcoin, he said it in the end, go to a Bitcoin meetup, you'll know that everyone will have an intellectual advance compared to like normies, and you'll just get along. And I feel like this is what this episode was about. It was quite high level, very detailed, but it was just fucking great. That's the only thing I can say to it.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating, and we got an exclusive readout on a book that he's currently writing on praxeology, which was fascinating and mind blowing all at the same time. And it's something now I'll need to actually go away and read about, because my understanding of praxeology is something about the theory of human action based on engagement and purposeful behavior, and that's pretty much my limited understanding of it, but he read out a nice sort of paragraph for us, which I'm very grateful that he did do that. What else did we even spoke about existentialism and having an existential crisis, which related back to his book and talking about morality and time. Mate, I don't know where to begin. It was a fascinating chat.
Yeah, we even covered how people who embrace inflation are actually con artists because they hate death, and there's a connection there. So like, it was great on all fronts, and I
Right.
really appreciate Knut's time, because like we had to move the interview a bit, and it was getting quite late. I was worried that we might have to cut it short. But he kept on going. I loved the rants he had. He even apologized halfway through, so that was quite
Yeah.
cute as well. So
Yeah, no,
it
and
was
the
just
fact that
amazing. Yeah.
Bitcoin as well is more than just actually Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is everything, because that's the foundation, and everything on top of Bitcoin. Just us talking about Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Brilliant.
So just enjoy, kick back, guys, take a cup of tea, and have fun listening into Knut.
Good day, everybody. Welcome back to Rabbit Hole Stories. It's Ian here, and with me I've got Joelle, my usual co-host. And today we've got a special guest, and it's well, I'll let you introduce yourself, shall I? Who have we got here today?
Oh, you want me to introduce myself?
That'd be nice, yeah.
I'm Knut Svanholm. I'm a guy in my mid-40s writing books about Bitcoin, and I wrote a couple of books about Bitcoin, and at the moment I'm writing a book about praxeology, and doing a bunch of other stuff in the Bitcoin space. I'm on the governance board for the Free Madeira organization, which is a non-profit trying to accelerate hyper-Bitcoinization on the island of Madeira. And I'm an advisor for the Orange Pill app, and I'm making a course on the Emeralize platform, and a bunch of other things. And I'm doing a bit of a world tour here this spring. I'm going to a bunch of conferences, beginning with going back to Madeira in February, and then in March, it looks like I might be going to Poland. And then in April, I'm going to Sydney, Australia, and Stuttgart, I believe, Germany. And in May, I'm going to Miami. It looks like I'm going to Miami. Not finalized yet, but it seems so. And in June, I'm going to Prague for the BTC Prague conference.
Wow.
So a busy spring.
You've got a busy schedule ahead. The world tour of Knut, huh?
yeah. And then there's the fall coming as well, where with all the usual suspect conferences there, Riga and Amsterdam, and if that's a thing this year, and and whatever other conferences come on my radar. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Excited for all of it, of course, and it's nice to be out of the fiat rat race and doing Bitcoin full time, and just, you know, hopping on to whatever seems interesting at the moment and trying to do something good and provide people with value where I can.
That's brilliant, and thank you for that eloquent introduction to who you are and the work that you do. And again, thank you for the hard work that you do in the Bitcoin space. It's very much appreciated. And thank you for joining us here at Rabbit Hole Stories. And what we're interested in, Knut, is just understanding a little bit about your rabbit hole story. And what we're intrigued about on this show is just trying to chat to people and figure out how they got into Bitcoin and why they decided to stay and hang around in the space. So I guess it's a good place to start. And I think my question we'll kick off with today is, what is your Bitcoin origin story?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and the thing is, I don't really remember a specific starting point. But I guess in the maybe around 2014 or something, or maybe even earlier than that, I first heard about it and developed an interest in it. And like everyone else around that time, I watched a lot of Andreas Antonopoulos videos mainly. And I've always been sort of liberty-minded and liking the ideas of free markets and personal liberty, free speech, and so on. But then I heard about this thing that was money on the internet that couldn't be replicated. And it intrigued me a lot, because at the time I was working on a tall ship with high school students on board, so sailing around the Atlantic Ocean with high school students and visiting a lot of different countries. And even before that, I've been traveling quite a lot. Even as a child, we used to live in Africa a couple of times during my childhood, in Mozambique and Tanzania. So I saw all of these different places of the different countries, and I've always been like fascinated by how different they were, and also how similar they were in other senses. And all of the regular stories you hear about why the stories you're being spoon-fed about why things are the way they are, they never really seem to make sense to me. And it wasn't really until I found Bitcoin and then subsequently fell down the praxeology rabbit hole and the Austrian economics rabbit hole that things really started to make sense. And you see the world in a whole different light afterwards. So I in 2016 or beginning of 2017, I had just read Skin in the Game by Nicholas Taleb. Nicholas Nassim Taleb, is that his old name? It's a very good book that basically tell you that in order to make something of yourself, you have to risk something. And you have to like risk your reputation. And it's about, these how our leaders in the past always, like when there was a big battle on a field somewhere, the guy leading the battle, the leader of the pack was always in the front, and that's why everyone was following that leader, because they looked up to him so much, because he was really leading by example. And there's a lot of stuff like that in that book. And I had just finished an online course in digital currencies, plural form, at the University of Nicosia, where Andreas Antonopoulos was one of the teachers. And I passed that with flying colors. I have a bit of a background in mathematics since high school and university. I started studying electronics engineering just after I finished high school at a university in Sweden, but dropped out of that after 1 year because I was so tired of school and everything. And then I started working on boats instead, and it eventually became a sea captain, or that's my university degree, is Master Mariner. But where was I? I had finished this course, and I had a choice if I was going to continue this thing and study the whole master's degree in digital currencies, which cost quite a bit of money. So I thought, I was thinking to myself, because I had quite a boring job at the time. I was working as a captain on a small crew transfer vessel in Denmark and Germany, taking technicians to wind farms in the North Sea and the Baltic. And at this particular site, we had wing cleaners on board. And what the wing cleaners do is that you take them to the early morning, you take them out, like 20-minute boat ride out to wind turbine. You drop them off, and they climb up the nozzle of the turbine, and then hang in ropes. They pull the brakes on the thing, and they hang down by rope and inspect the wing for the whole day. So we went to another. Me and the other guy on board just went to another turbine and moored by that turbine, and then we had 10 hours of nothing. And a very bad internet connection, and I had some paperwork to do, and checking the oil levels and whatnot, and that took like half an hour, and then I had 9.5 hours of nothing to look forward to. And I got bored with the games on my phone pretty quickly, and with a crappy internet connection, and a slight ADD diagnosis. Well, ADD wasn't invented when I was a kid, but I suspect I have something on the spectrum.
Right.
So I couldn't sit still. So I decided to start writing articles about Bitcoin, and use this newfound knowledge to write, opinion pieces and all sorts of articles about Bitcoin. And they quite quickly got picked up by a publication called Hacker Noon. This is in 2017.
Okay.
And one of them became sort of semi-viral, got like 70,000 reads or something. This was just before the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. And I had read up on the subject and decided to write an article about how to take control of your own private keys, because you needed to be in control of your keys in order to claim the Bitcoin Cash and sell them as fast as possible, and thereby increasing your stack of real Bitcoins.
Right.
So that was what I was trying to do, and to tell people, educate people about how to do that. So that's my first, and when that got that little push of attention there, I thought maybe there's something here. Maybe there's a way for me to put my foot in the door here before the window of opportunity closes, and see if I can do something here. Because I was fascinated mainly by Andreas Antonopoulos and him flying around the world, going to conferences and telling people about Bitcoin. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wonder if I could do that one day.
Right.
I wrote these articles, and when I had written about 40 of them, I decided to compile them into a book, because I've never written a book. I thought I've got enough material here for a book, so I just put the articles together and released a book. But after having done that, I was a bit disappointed in myself, because I had a book to my name, but it wasn't really a book. It was a collection of articles, and most of them were trial and error, and full of grammatical errors and misspellings and stuff. I didn't have an editor. I didn't have anything. So I thought, so in 2019, on New Year's Eve 2018, I decided to write a proper book about Bitcoin. And I promised myself as a New Year's resolution to write a page a day for the whole year. And as you do with all New Year's resolutions, you break them after a couple of months. And I broke mine after 106 days, which is when I decided that sovereignty through mathematics was done and ready to be released to the world. And I released it first, like the first chapter on Medium, and it got picked up by a guy who does not want to be associated with the project anymore because he didn't agree with some of the political views and whatnot. But he offered to help me edit the book, and did up until half of the last chapter. So I had to like rely on myself for half the last chapter, but the rest of the book became a lot better because of the editing, of course, because when you're not really an author and you try to write a book, you don't really know how the process works, and it's just trial and error, all of it. But I realized that if I have an editor, the book the material, the final product will become a lot better. So I was really happy about Sovereignty Through Mathematics when it was actually done, and released it in, I believe, June that year, or May or June that year. And of course, nobody bought it and nobody gave a shit until I brought 50 copies to the Baltic Honey Badger conference in Riga 2019. And I sold 25 and gave 25 away to important people in Bitcoin. And, taking Lightning payments even back in 2019, and all fun and games. And I had a swell time there and got to know a lot of people. A lot of other, that are big names in Bitcoin now, but nobody knew of then, except for a little fringe community on Twitter. Gigi, for instance, and Max Hillebrand, we met there, and none of us really had any type of following. We had like 1,000 followers each, and so everything happened after that for all of us, which is very, in hindsight, very, very nice to have this parallel thing going on. And then that book sort of took off, and now it's recommended on hope.com, MicroStrategy's Bitcoin site. It's one of the first 5 books you see there, so I'm very proud of that. And I decided to write a follow-up the next year called Independence Reimagined, and that's my least famous book, but it has one of the more famous quotes in it, which is the one-shot principle about how resistance to replicability cannot be replicated. And we're in the midst of making a rehash or a issue of these 2 books and putting them together into one book with a new and Prince Philip has promised to write the foreword for that. So we're re-releasing that in the same design as the Everything Divided by 21 Million book. So that's the book coming out this spring, and the praxeology book I'm working on at the moment. Yeah, later on in the journey, I continued writing articles for Citadel 21 magazine, which is published by Hodlonaut and Katja up in Norway. And we became very good friends as well. And some of the articles were made into videos. I collaborate with an animator called Joni Appelberg. And in one of the articles, there was a sentence that said, imagine everything there is divided by 21 million. And in the animated version of that, that equation was the graphic for that sentence. And after that, things became weird.
Things
really fucking weird.
Somewhat.
yeah, it's not somewhat snowballed, and now there's I have like a folder of Bitcoin of everything divided by 21 million stuff from around the world, and there's a subfolder called tattoos, and there's like 18 pictures of people with the equation tattooed on somewhere on their bodies, including side boobs and biceps and stuff. Like, so it's
right.
Yeah, so that's when I realized that I had to write a book with that title and claim it, like, for
Absolutely, yeah.
So I wrote that book last winter. We moved down to Spain. This is during COVID. The article was published on August 21st, 2020, and in early August 2021. Spring of 2021, I was invited to a conference in Mexico, just at the end of all the COVID things. So by Ugly Old Goat. so I told my wife I need to go to Mexico to visit Ugly Old Goat, and she gave me a look. But I did, and during my time in Mexico, I realized that 8/21 is August 21 in the American way of spelling dates. Like, that's how they how you put dates in America, like with the month first and the day after. And 8/21 sort of looks like.
I see it on its side. Yes.
So I decided that the 21st of August will be Bitcoin Infinity Day. Right there. I think this is like the 3rd of August 2021 or something. So I decide that there and then, and announce it on Tonevay's trading pod, and with a hashtag Bitcoin Infinity Day, and like you're supposed to do something here, I guess. Stack 21 times your normal daily average stack or whatever. We figured out the name first and what to do later. To this day, I still don't know if people know what to do on Bitcoin Infinity Day, but now it's a legit
now's the opportunity
holiday
to tell them what we should do on that day.
Yeah, so you're supposed to stack 21 times your normal daily average stack, which is a bit too complicated maybe. But anyway, after I announced it, like a week after I get this, I see this stunning video from Fractal Encrypt, whom I've there's a story with me and Fractal Encrypt also. Before the second book, Independence Reimagined, I stumbled upon a video on Twitter of Fractal Encrypt's, the full node statue. I guess you've seen it, the rings.
Yeah.
And I noticed that one of the rings said sovereignty through mathematics. So I DM'd Fractal Encrypt, whom I didn't know at the time, and I told him, do you know there's a coincidence here? You put the same words on your ring there as I named my book. Like, it's the same phrase. And he's like, yeah, dude, I was listening to your book while I made the statue. and my jaw dropped to the floor. Like, this is so cool. I'm on that thing. Like, what the hell is this? So that's amazing. That's when I then got to use that thing for the cover of the second book. With Fractal's blessing. But after this Bitcoin Infinity Day idea, like within a week afterwards, Fractal comes up with this key thingy with the equation on it, and it says everything divided by 21 million. Yeah, the one that's on the cover.
Yeah.
There. So and long story short, he decided to we riffed on ideas back and forth of what to do with that thing, and it turned out he made 21 private keys, and there are only 21 of those, and he gave out 20 of them to people who had told him something about Bitcoin that he didn't know. So there was a bit of a contest on Twitter there, and he gave key number 1 out of 21 to me. And,
naturally.
Yoni got a key, and Guy Swan got a key, and Michael Saylor got a key because he's one of the people who bought the full node statue. And he auctioned out key number 8 out of 21, and that sold for 1.05 Bitcoin, which at the time was around $70,000.
Wow.
And I had my mother-in-law pick it up at the post office, and I asked her afterwards, like, can you guess the price of this piece of art here that you just picked up? Oh, $100? You can do better than that. $1,000? $4,000? Oh, it's worth like 10 times your car.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a weird story. And of course, on Bitcoin Infinity Day, the concept, Sailor retweeted it, and Adam Back retweeted it, and all sorts of big names started to make a thing out of Bitcoin Infinity Day. So it just exploded. So naturally this year, or last year, I tried to promote Bitcoin Infinity Day again, and in the weeks preceding August 21st, and nothing was happening. No one was retweeting my, like, don't forget Bitcoin Infinity Day tweets. So I sort of gave up on it, and like, people don't remember this stupid internet thing. It was a fad. It's going to go away. And then August 21st happens, of course, and I have a notification literally every fucking second of that.
Right.
Those 24 hours. It's just exploding. So, yeah, it's weird.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny how these things just snowballed for you from you being offshore at a wind farm, watching people dangling at a terrifying height from these blades, cleaning these blades, and you are maximizing your time, because you go into that quite a lot in your book about time, and you took hold of your time and produced something, and it's just become this sort of huge event after event after event for you.
Yeah. I didn't produce that specific article until later, after I published Sovereignty and everything. But it all started there. It's
a series of essays that you were writing.
Yeah. It's like a game of dominoes, like, for sure. It's one thing leads to another. And you never know, like, the only thing you can be sure of here in this life is that if nothing will happen if you don't try.
Yeah.
So, like, if you do try, most probably nothing will happen either. but it may happen if you try. If you don't try, you can be pretty fucking sure that nothing will happen. So yeah, don't give up. Like, whatever. If you feel like doing something, just start doing it. Like,
yeah.
There are so many people on high horses telling you that you need this and that credential in order to do this. But Bitcoin is so refreshingly devoid of all that. It's a pure meritocracy. People will only judge you for what you actually created or actually produced, and nothing else. And so far, I'm doing pretty well, and I'm very happy about that, because it sure has, revigorated my sense of self-esteem, or whatever you can call it.
Yeah. And my next question was going to be,
and very humbling.
I bet.
To be a part of, humbling, and I'm sort of in between total imposter syndrome and I am the Lizard King, I can do anything, and I don't know where on the scale I am, but somewhere in between. And
I imagine that fluctuates for you from time to time, right?
You
need to check yourself sometimes and sort of check your.
I pinch myself all the time.
Right. I mean, my next question was going to be: has Bitcoin changed you in any way, and if so, how? But I think you've already answered that question.
Well, it changed my life. I hope it hasn't changed me too much. I think I'm still the same person. I think a lot of the insights came before Bitcoin about how to philosophical insights, such as that which you can do without your own, and stuff like that. That sentence has been with me some way before Bitcoin, and like I'm sort of I'm not a materialist, I'm a minimalist, but I have a family, so but me myself, I just need a toothbrush and a laptop and a guitar, and I'm that's basically it.
Funny enough, the brother of one of my ex-girlfriend, he was also named Knut. So, and he said the exact same thing. So maybe it's a Swedish and like a name thing that all of you.
There aren't
that.
very many Swedes called Knut, though. It's more common in Norway than in Sweden, the name.
Oh, okay, interesting.
No.
But in
Anyway,
essence,
that's my story.
but in essence, Knut, writing. I mean, you were curious about Bitcoin and possibly digital currencies back in the days, but in essence,
Not really. I was a maxi from day one. I lost the fantastic amount of $8 on shitcoins because I took $10 and invested $1 in each shitcoin, and 8 of them went down and 2 of them went up. So I decided like this is not for me. I have no way of knowing which one is going which way, and the lion's share of them are of course going to crash. And how could I pick the right one at the right time? This is a fool's game for sure. Like so, I never really fell down that, and it never made sense to me. Like this is just a number on a screen. The only thing that makes it different than other numbers on screens is that it can't be duplicated. So duplicating it makes absolutely no sense, or trying to make a 2.0 version makes no sense either. So that proud to say that, yeah, I had almost no shitcoin period at all.
Yeah, isn't it funny how you always read about these billionaires calling out the greater fool theory with like Bitcoin, and then if you read it, you're like, have you heard of like other coins? Have you heard of like the cryptocurrency place? Because those are, in my opinion, most of them are like the greater fool in terms that, as you mentioned, you're trying to pick out what
Not
works.
most
and what
of them,
doesn't.
all of them.
Yeah,
Absolutely all of them.
true.
Yeah.
I see the only essence I see sometimes if I speak to people in like third world countries, you know, they're saying like, we get Bitcoin, but we don't get access to dollars. So,
Yeah, so
we want
they
to
want
use
the
this
stable
one. I'm
coins.
like, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you some time. You maybe
Yeah.
come around.
Stable coins may be a means to a handicapped means to much greater end at a very specific point in time, which is right now and
Right.
for the next 5 years they may play a role. But other than that, they're just the same shit as every other fiat shitcoin. Like shitcoins come in 2 main categories: the cryptocurrencies and the kleptocurrencies, which are the altcoins and the fiat currencies. But they're both shit. So a stablecoin doesn't fix the shittiness of the central bank.
No, and I mean, for most of the friends I talk to, like half a year later, they come back to like, yeah, I should have bought some sats back then. But anyway, I'm
Yeah.
happy that they get around, you know, that's the main thing. But what I wanted to say, in an essence, writing led you to really discovering what lies underneath Bitcoin. Is that still a routine you're trying to keep up? So are you actively trying to write another book from the stories you've told?
Yeah, I'm writing a book on praxeology at the moment. So I'm actively writing that, but all of my writing energy goes into that at the moment.
Okay.
Can we get a sneak peek as to what that is about? Well, obviously, it's about praxeology, but do you want to explain a little bit about what that is for people
I
that might
might
not know
have
that?
a section to quote, like a quote or something from it. This is the first time anyone hears anything from this. So let's see here what I have. Yeah. Throughout the ages, it has been difficult for humans to adopt a helicopter view of the age in which they live. Humans tend to think their worldview is modern and, for the most part, correct. Science itself can only progress when we dare to question its very foundation. The statement, an increase in the supply of good X will lead to a reduction of its market price if all other factors remain unchanged, does not require empirical evidence. We can conclude that the statement is true using deductive reasoning alone, and empirical evidence can neither further prove nor disprove the claim. To understand human action, we must rid ourselves of all preconceived notions about how to prove scientific claims true or false. As long as the aggressor's propaganda machines are as powerful as they are today, with government-subsidized media outlets and at least 12 years of mandatory brainwashing in almost every country, changing people's minds is a daunting task. But if the pen is indeed mightier than the sword, logical arguments are our only weapon. This author firmly believes that our species' yearning for the truth will triumph and prevent us from destroying ourselves by denying it. So that's a passage of the book.
Wow, that's quite a lot to unpack, but also extremely fascinating. And the concept of a helicopter view, so essentially zooming out and observing things on a landscape scale rather than what's in front of you, driven by state propaganda and the way things are sold to you as a narrative by the state. Is that, in essence, part of the message that you're saying
and
there?
it ties back to low time preference. In order to understand what's going on, you'd sort of need a low time preference to grasp things. That's what I think there's very much connected to time preference, how we think that problems are so immediate and dangerous right now and need to be fixed right away, like viruses and climate disasters and terrorism and whatnot. And if we had more of a long-term outlook on things and could be a little bit more thoughtful about these things, maybe we could come up with better plans on how to solve all the perceived problems instead of just panicking, which, like, Greta Thunberg tells us to panic, but I think, like, what the hell good is that going to do? Like, what we need to do is not panic, like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, the only thing you know is don't panic.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I think what the state is doing more so is keeping us on that hamster's wheel, which you refer to in your book, Everything Divided by 21 Million. And you talk about time preference quite a lot. There's a whole chapter on time in that book. And the state is continuing to infringe on our time and rob us of our time, and by doing so it prevents us from really deep thinking, having the time to reflect on our own lives and how we can escape that machine.
And it's very hard to actually do good for other people while you're still in that machine, just feeding the dragon. And that chapter on time is basically a condensed version of another great book called This Book Will Save You Time by Misir Mahmudov, if you know that. Criminally underrated book. That book goes deeper into how the attention economy is making us even more high time preference creatures by stealing our attention all the time. So and I'm very much a victim of that too. I don't like calling myself a victim, but I have fallen into those traps. Like victim is the wrong word. I hate the word victim. Everyone's a fucking victim these days. The thing is, when I write, I usually listen to a YouTube video and play a computer game simultaneously.
That's your mind palace moment of trying to actually take the information
I need some
in.
distraction as well. But this is the same thing when I was in school and in the university. I always used to scribble and draw little doodles and cartoon figures. To the extent that I had to buy a new notebook just for doodling. So, keeping busy.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but there's a famous quote saying you should let the mind wander and let it rest, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
so,
it's hard to let it rest, though. My mind is like a cacophony. Like if you listen to really weird music where everything is going on at once, like Spike Jones or something. That's like a soundtrack to my brain. There's too much going on all the time, and it's very hard to find find something in there. But when I do, and I manage to focus, then I can channel something. And that's what I'm looking for in my writing, like to get into that, what surfers call the green room, and where you can just be and focus on a specific task. That's like honing in on something and just focusing. That's it's a great feeling when you finally get there.
I think the soundtrack to my mind would be something Pink Floyd-esque or Radiohead in some way. That's what my mind, I think, sounds like.
Yeah, I wish my mind sounded like that. Well, it's a bit depressing, maybe. But
yeah, very melancholy. Yeah.
Dark sarcasm.
Yes.
But is that a skill, Knut, you would say you've always had, or is that something which evolved with Bitcoin? Being able, if once you get it, to nail down focus, and from what it sounds like, basically never leaving your room or the keyboard.
I've been better at managing it after finding Bitcoin, but I've always been a creative person. I used to play a lot of music, and I was in a lot of bands before the Bitcoin thing. I wrote songs all the time. So that was my creative output back then. But
nice.
this has forced me to focus on a whole another level, and I've realized that talking about these difficult subjects helps my writing, and the other way around. My writing helps me talk about these things. And that was also a journey, like going on interviews such as this one. The first couple of interviews I did were extremely embarrassing. I just couldn't get a word out. But you get used to all of it, and it's good to challenge yourself, and see how far you can take things.
It's interesting because you a lot of I suppose now you've completely escaped the fiat mining that a lot of people are still having to continue to exist within, and I'm just wondering how, by you having done that, how that's changed your has it redefined what time is for you in any way now that you're in more of a Bitcoin world than the fiat world?
Yeah, well, I haven't, it was a tough decision because I don't have the amount of Bitcoin savings needed to say fuck you to fiat forever.
Yeah.
So I still need to do stuff for a living and try to earn an income. So I basically used a part of my stack, and mostly just a part of my fiat stack, and whatever was left over from the old fiat job, to buy myself time in order to set up this whole making a career out of this hobby thing. But now, writing a book or writing books is a very strange thing to do, and a strange process, because you have to people ask me, when did you start writing the book? Like, how the fuck would I know? Like, when did I start thinking? I mean, I started writing when I was born, I guess. Because the actual typing letters into a keyboard, that's a very, very small part of the entire process. And that's the fast part. Like when you've got it figured out in your head what you're gonna write, the actual writing goes fast, and you can like scribble it out pretty quickly. So the hard part is figuring out what to write. So I spent a lot of time just walking around the area here and thinking about stuff. But yeah, and this just before I started writing this praxeology book, like the other Bitcoin projects I'm in, they take up a bit of time, and a significant bit of time, and but they still, it's not enough to feel like a full-time job. So I had like sort of a inner dialogue about like what am I doing here? Where am I going to focus my energy? Like I need to do something, and one day I'm just like, well, I'm an author. Like, if you're gonna be an author, write something, you asshole. Like, and slapped myself on the face and on the cheek, and started writing again. So like, but I think this it would be hard to write more than one book a year, because like once you're done with a book, you don't feel like writing at all, because you do it very intensely for a short period of time. Like
I imagine it's quite exhausting, actually.
It is exhausting because there's so many things to juggle in your head at the same time, and the longer the book is, the harder it is to keep it coherent, and like, yeah, it's a difficult process.
For me personally, whenever I try to write something down, my mind is running at 100 miles an hour, and my fingers are just sort of like, and before I get the sentence out, my mind's running off, and I can't slow my mind down enough to commit to writing something down. It's a difficult one.
It is hard, but the best way, there's only one way to do it. It's just try it over and over and over again. Like, just sit by a keyboard and if you're going to be an author, be an author. Like, there are no shortcuts. There are good tools like Grammarly, for instance. That's a good tool. And nowadays I have a team of editors and proofreaders and stuff, and designers and typesetters and whatnot. And that's a huge privilege, and I'm very lucky to be in that situation. So that's another thing that, you know, sort of indirectly kicks myself in the balls, because like you have this opportunity to do this stuff. So go ahead and do it, and like, why aren't you doing more of it? You know how appreciate the older how people appreciated the older stuff, and what that led to, and one thing led to another. Keep on doing it. Like, what else are you gonna do? You're gonna sit here and play with your kids? Fuck that.
How old are your kids, Knut?
They're 11 and 9.
Okay, so they're old enough to understand.
And I love them very much, but they have no interest in playing with me anyway. So, like...
do they have an interest? Do they have an interest in Bitcoin? And is that something that you've?
Yeah, but they have a slight interest in Bitcoin, but I don't want to be that parent that forces it upon them. It has to come from them, and but when they've interacted with other Bitcoiners on occasion, and maybe someone wanted to give them a tip, and like, what's your ask my son what's your lightning address, and he's like, oh. And then he feels like obligated to know this stuff, and like, so I like that kind of approach.
Nice. So getting back to one of your books, I feel like if someone asks what kind of books have you read from Knut, someone is going to come up with Everything Divided by 21 Million. And there's actually a passage in there which I always have very intense discussions with like fellow Bitcoiners at like meetups. Ian and I, we actually met at a London meetup in August. So it quite evolved quite quickly into the podcast. And one of the guys was like, if you have Knut on, can you ask him in detail what he meant by element zero, how Bitcoin is element zero? I was like, well, he kind of explains it in the book, but I'll ask him again in the podcast.
There's a chapter about it.
Yeah, for such a lazy person who wants to elaborate on that. But could you maybe in a couple of sentences explain from you and how you feel Bitcoin is element zero?
Oh, that's a big one to answer in a short way. But let me give you a bunch of information about the chapter. The idea comes from a brilliant German guy called Jörg Hemstorff. Who had a brilliant talk at the Value of Bitcoin conference in 2020 online about a talk called The Last Money, and how Bitcoin can be the last type of money we ever need. And he breaks it down so brilliantly into like how everything in this universe is just ones and zeros, basically, because at the fundamental particles, when you go down to the quantum realm, as they would say in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, everything is just information. So the smallest particles, we can either measure their position or where they're going, but not both at once. And we can also, as soon as we measure them, they decide on one state or another. So quarks and photons and such. I'm not a quantum physicist, so I don't have this totally nailed down, but this is from my understanding. Big disclaimers here. But they're basically in a qubit is a state that is both a 1 and a 0 at the same time. And each particle has a higher probability of becoming a 0 or a 1. But when we measure them, they're either or. So they're yin and yang, true or false, 1 or 0. And that's all they are. And the universe is made up of these tiniest things, and they can only exist in positions. The smallest length between them is called the Planck length. I'm realizing that this answer is way too long already.
No worries. Do you know
when you ask that question, Joel, how can he explain that in a couple of sentences?
Let me fast forward a bit, because I think I lost a lot of your listeners already. The point is that everything is information, and like there are two elements on the periodic table that have a stable isotope. They mononucleic, I think the word is, like where there's only one stable isotope of the element, and they are scarce in nature, and they're hard to destroy, and all sorts of properties that make them a good money. And one of them is gold, and the other is another element called what's the other element? I don't remember the name of the other element, but it was discovered much more recently than gold. Gold has been around for a long time. And gold emerged on the free market as money because it had all these properties. So it was very suitable as a medium of exchange and a store of value. Now, the chapter in the book is called Alchemy, because alchemy, the alchemists of old, they tried to make gold from cheaper metals. So in a way, they tried to do what central banks are actually doing at this moment. They are making gold out of cheaper metals, right, namely paper and digits on a screen. They are producing money without cost. So they're not really making gold, but they're making fool's gold. And a successful alchemist would have done the same thing if it would have defeated its own purpose, because if it was cheap to make gold, the market would be flooded with gold, and then gold wouldn't be scarce anymore and thus lose its value. So, but the element zero thing is approaching this problem from the other way. So we try to reverse engineer a chemical element. So we start from what properties would an element need to have to be damn near perfect money? And it would need to be scarce, and it would need to be very light, so you could transport it easily. And it would also need to be able to, there's something called electronegativity, and it needs to be able to sort of store electricity or store energy.
Yeah.
And it needs to be hard to destroy, and also it needs to have all these strange properties that no element on the periodic table has. So what's the lightest element you can think of? well, that's no element at all. If we can find just information that has all these other properties that can store energy, and it's hard to find and it's hard to destroy, well, that could be the element itself. So it's just an informational element, which would mean that, yeah. So say that if someone was to sacrifice a huge amount of energy, and you could somehow turn that into a hash of a number, so you found a proof of that this amount of energy had been sacrificed, then that information would be the element. So the information about the element is the element. And this is what Bitcoin is. So like, and when I first heard this idea expressed, I was literally mind blown by the simplicity and the beauty of like, shit, we can reverse engineer chemistry in order to suit our needs, and find something then, sorry, if it works, would be the perfect thing for us to communicate value with one another. And that's what Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin is the informational element, the element without mass. It has a lot of other properties that proper elements have, but it doesn't have mass. So it can be teleported and communicated. And it's just beautiful.
I had the same mind-blowing moment when I read it, because it does make sense in the sense that everything does boil down to just, at its core, it's just information.
Yeah.
Down to the minute atoms, the neutrons, electrons that make up something. We are just information just by being in existence. We're speaking through this computer, this technology. All of everything around us is just information. And the fact that Bitcoin is in existence, it's in some realm somewhere that we can actually take ownership of and use it as money. Therefore, it's also got to be of the same stuff as everything else is.
Yeah.
And
but
that was just
it goes deeper than that, because when you own a Bitcoin, when you have your private keys, you don't only own your Bitcoin, but you possess them.
Right.
And there's a difference there.
Right.
So like the hats you're wearing, I can be the owner of both those hats, and I've just gave you the hats and I want them back at some point in time. But you're in possession of the hats, and you're in different countries than I am. or in a different country than I am. So even if I want them back, you can refuse to give them back. So you're in possession of them. But the knowing as owning part of Bitcoin is like when you know your private key, you don't only own your Bitcoin, but you possess them. And you can go even deeper than that and realize that if your head is the only place in which this information exists, so if you have your seed phrase or the location of your seed phrase in your head, then you are your Bitcoins. There's no distinction between you and the thing. That isn't a thing, but an agreement or something. So you can actually be your Bitcoins. You're the same entity. And that is, yeah. I can go on for 12 hours about this stuff, but like when I get the question, what is Bitcoin nowadays? My shortest and best answer to date is it's an agreement between people on a fixed set of rules, and that's all it is. We just agree on a fixed set of rules. And when we do, we can engage in a game. And the latest... you saw the latest video, right? That I made with Joni Appelberg. I make the chess analogy in that. Did you see the Element Zero video?
Yes. Yes, I did, yeah. With the animation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's... The Element Zero one is pretty much just the chapter in the book animated. The animated version of it. But in the latest one, why Bitcoin is the greatest meme of all time, I make the chess analogy. So like, if you know the rules of chess, you can play with any other chess player in the world. So you have a massive network of fun. so you can have fun with millions of people. If you choose to play chess without rooks or without pawns or whatever, you can maybe play with a couple of people, but you don't have this giant network effect.
Mm-hmm.
So you can play chess cash with a board that's way too large with too few pieces on it. You can play chess Therium, where the rules change for every move. And you can play chess Nero, where no one knows how many pieces there are or what the game is really about. But you can play all sorts of stupid chess rules that no one gives a crap about. But in order to get the network effect of the game, you need to play by the rules that everyone has come to a consensus around what the rules really are. And the funny thing about chess is that even if like some international chess foundation or governance board decided to change the rules, most players wouldn't implement the change. They couldn't just change it without having the players on their side. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin is just that. It's nothing but that. It's just like the games, the rules of chess. It's just that when you know chess, you can play chess with other people. When you know Bitcoin, you can do everything with other people. It's the game of fucking everything.
Right.
Because it sets it's a set of rules with which we can interact with one another in any way possible. We can trade any good or service for this little secret we have. And more than that, it changes us on so many fundamental levels. First of this, we have perfectly sound money, and thus we have a lower time preference, so which makes us save more and consume less. But also, like what we're doing now, you want me as a guest because you want to have this conversation with me, and it's good for your podcast to have me as a guest. I want to be on your podcast because it's a platform for me, so I can spread my message to more people.
Yeah, it's mutually beneficial for us. Yeah.
It's mutually beneficial, so we're engaged in a trade.
Right.
And we're not sending sats to one another at all. We're not exchanged a single sat yet. And we probably won't for a while. For any foreseeable future anyway.
Right.
But we're still trading, and we're still using Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We're using Bitcoin for our own purposes right now. Like we're taking advantage of the fact that Bitcoin exists. Bitcoin the idea and Bitcoin the meme. So we're using Bitcoin, albeit indirectly, but we're still using it. And the funny thing is, the more you think about it, as we move into this hyper-Bitcoinized world, this incentive to, because we like to help one another, because we know that if Bitcoiners succeed, Bitcoin succeeds. And we're all Bitcoiners, and we all want Bitcoin to succeed, because then number go up and we become richer, and we all like that. Because it's swell to be rich, right? So, but this is the funny thing. This incentive to help one another with all of these projects, I don't see a time in the future where that goes away, that incentive. And the more people that come on board to Bitcoin, I mean, it's more like that incentive grows than shrinks over time. Which is weird, because it means, like, what does that mean when everyone's on a Bitcoin standard and we don't need to spread the message anymore? Well, we're still incentivized to help one another. Why would we stop?
Right.
Like, so we get into this world where everyone's just fucking awesome to one another all the time. And we don't spend a lot of money on consumerist bullshit, but we make long-term decisions. And I just see a very much more beautiful world. And the funny thing is, when you think about it, Bitcoin is not money. It's just a piece of code. So it's just information and mathematics. So by running this mathematical experiment in the back of our heads, we unlock something within ourselves. And this is what I've been using in my talks and in that video as well. So the Beatles were right. All you need is love. They just hadn't found the equation for it yet. Like,
Right.
But now we did. The equation is Satoshi's equation, which equals everything divided by 21 million. And it unlocks... a Bitcoin private key is literally a key to your heart. So it unlocks something within you that you had all along. You just didn't have the tools to unlock that power that was in you already as a human being. But to me, it's completely mind-blowing what that can lead to in the future.
So Bitcoin is love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with the safety...
And it's also fuck you money. Which
right, right.
And fucking is love.
Yeah.
Many people claim it's not, but it is. There's just too much to this. It's just, I never get tired of talking about it, by the way.
That's one of the issues.
Nor do we.
Yeah, but that's one of the issues you see if I have a lot of friends in mainstream media and especially in finance media, and they're always like, okay, try to explain it to me. And I'm like, I can't, because like you guys are mostly so filled with either it is hate, it is, chasing the newest clickbait title.
Yeah. Envy.
Deciding which weapon you send to what part of the world. I'm like, how the fuck are we on the same basis? Like, take a chill pill and then we can start with the basics of it all. Which is also why you can't explain it in like an hour. We're over an hour now. And it takes those 100,000, 10,000 hours.
Yeah, you need to do the 10,000 hours in order to... But life on the other side is so much better. And like, when you think about it, when you think about how Bitcoin, the protocol upgrades, some guy sends in a Bitcoin improvement proposal, a BIP. And if the BIP is good enough, there's you vote with your node on whether to run the code or not. And it's not really a vote either. It's just what you decide Bitcoin is to you. Mm-hmm. And usually the majority wins because of the, just like chess, if the majority doesn't win, it's probably crap. And a shitcoin. Right. So the majority needs to win. Which means that the upgrade needs to be really fucking good in order for everyone to agree that it's a good idea to upgrade the protocol. And this gets harder and harder over time as the network grows. Because, convincing a million people is a hell lot harder than convincing 10,000.
Right.
Which means that Bitcoin either stays the same way that it is right now, which is fucking awesome, or it becomes even better. It can't get worse. It can only get better. so that's the only way to interpret that. Like, if everyone agrees that it was a good idea, what other definition of a good idea do you have? Like, that's the perfect, that's the bulletproof good idea.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, stuff like the block size wars showed it. If there are a group of people who want different things, they can bugger off and do their own shit.
Yeah, and they did, and it was obviously a worse idea. But this is it has to be voluntary, and it has to work this way in order to function at all. But as I said, it's just an agreement. We found a way to agree on a fixed set of rules, and to agree on a system that makes them impervious to change unless the change is better for absolutely everyone. Mm-hmm. And that is, which means that Bitcoin can only get better over time. But here's the kicker. Since Bitcoin exists and everyone in the world can voluntarily hop onto the network and be a part of it, humanity can only get better from this point on.
Mm. Right.
So the future is not dystopian CBDC's constant stomping boot on the face, everyone in chains. Like, it's not that. It's bright as fuck because we have Bitcoin. And Bitcoin can only get better. So by proxy, humanity can only get better.
So not only is Bitcoin love, Bitcoin is morality as well, and it's human progress.
Yeah. Salvation, for lack of a better word. And that's coming from a fucking hardcore atheist.
Me too. It's funny you say that being an atheist is as well, because last year I went through being a middle-aged man now. I went through a little bit of an existential crisis, and I had this sudden moment of actually fearing my own death. So much so that it triggered off a series of panic attacks, and it took me quite a long time to unpack the whole existential crisis. And I got to a place in my mind of trying to reflect on my death and time that I've got left, which is an unknown factor. And what I came to a place of comfort for me is obviously because I don't believe in an afterlife or the promise of an afterlife, which I think, without disrespecting people's religion and their beliefs, I think that the promise of an afterlife is something which is used to control us in some way. But I'm open to having that discussion with people, and I'm open to having that discussion with people. But for me, with my belief that there's nothing beyond my death, is a scary thought. And I came to realize that, you know what, even beyond my death, when I turn into dust, I'm still going to exist in some way in the universe. There's going to be particles.
All the particles in your body.
All the particles of me are going to be spread across the universe. And when I finally came to realizing that and finding comfort in that, and then reading your book about time and the alchemy. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and about morality. You read the chapter about afterlife and about being afterlife, existential inflation.
And it dilutes the value of time, and religion and the promise of an afterlife to try to control the population in some way, to do something on behalf of the state. Basically sacrifice their own life for their war agenda.
The church is basically the existential central bank. So they can print fake life. Right. And thereby diluting the value of the life you actually have on this earth. So that's how I view that, and that's the comparison I draw in the book. Like, imagine that you were immortal and indestructible, then nothing would be of value to you, and you wouldn't ever act, because the scarcity of your time on this earth.
You just become omnipotent to things.
Yeah, which means that you don't act. An omnipotent being has no incentives. It cannot act because there's no reason for it to do so. So that just, to me, that proves that scarcity brings value. Like this, and you can try to dilute that and come up with all sorts of other stories of. Whether it be fake money or fake life, doesn't matter. The value is in the scarcity. And Bitcoin is the perfect reflection of that, the scarcity of human life.
That's really brought that into focus for me. Sorry, Joel, go on.
And I mean, it also incentivizes, these are my fun talks with like friends and some family members that, I take it with the monetary example, they don't want something deflationary because, like, we've been used to inflation. We want our money to disappear every year by like 5%.
Because someone told us that was a good thing.
Yeah, an old fucker in a suit somewhere in America, or an old bitch at the ECB, depending how you look at it. But then at the same time, they're scared of death. I'm like, hang on a minute. If something devalues by, let's say, 5% every year, after a while, there's nothing more left there. So eventually it dies, right? Or there's another incentive to keep it alive, but it just keeps bleeding out at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Isn't that controversial? And they're always like, oh, hang on a minute. It is actually. And that's, for my personal experience, the easiest way to step into the orange pilling.
That's a very good point. Like, death is a very comforting thought to inflationists. Like, it should be, at least, because it's the only thing stopping the inflation. And that's a full stop. There will be no more inflation for you after this point, because you'll fucking die. But if your life goes on for 1,000 years, you can bet your currency won't exist like
anymore. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, and I mean, historically speaking, every time one of the superpowers died or a currency flat out was evaporated, you saw increases in monetary inflationary policies just because they knew, okay, like the old empire fucked up. We're going to make this that much more difficult or that much more harder for them to in the future not die, but eventually all of them die out because guess what? They play by the same stupid rulebook.
Yeah, and they changed the rule book. Like, it doesn't matter what your constitution says if some later generation comes along and changes it. Like, you know, the Magna Carta is as valid a document as the American Constitution, and they were both very, very good constitutions. The Constitution for the Weimar Republic or the Weimar Republic was very sound. If you read that, it's just mind-blowingly sounds swell. Like there's freedoms and like the people are free to do whatever they want, and there's just a basic social security layer, and like everything looks swell. But it didn't last because inflation happened, and that kills everything. That force. The force of money is stronger than the force of politics, so those incentives are stronger, and that's why everyone in politics eventually will get corrupted. Just takes time in some places, and I think right now in Europe, like the East Europeans, they've since it wasn't that long ago that the Soviet Union collapsed. Like most of the kids growing up there and that are in like the 20s or 30s now, they have parents that lived through that. So they know how bad statism can be in a way that we in the West have long since forgotten, and thus we fall for all this scaremongering narratives much more easily than the people in the old East Bloc.
True. You've been to the conference in Bulgaria as well, have you, Knut?
Yeah. I was in Bulgaria for the first time this fall, and I loved it. A very nice guy called Plamen Andonov invited me to Bulgaria to speak at a conference called the Crypto Revolution, which is being rebranded to the Bitcoin Revolution after we were there.
Nice.
He's a total max, and he was there also, and the name was more to lure more people in. We spent 4 days in a bus driving around Bulgaria. It was me and Jeff Booth, Greg Foss, Pierre Corbin, Nico Gilch, and Natalie Brunel and a couple of others. Drove around Bulgaria for 4 days and just saw beautiful places, magic, and the weather was perfect all the time. And we had a really nice tour guide there that showed us everything, and just a swell time.
Nice, because I'm only bringing it up because my best friend is from Bulgaria and his wife is from Slovakia. And they got Bitcoin in like 2012 and 2011, I think. One got in a bit earlier than the other. And I think they originated like their whole village in both of the countries. But he said it was the easiest experience ever because the older people especially realized it. And the younger ones were like, oh yeah, we can do whatever we want with a new standard instead of relying on whatever the EU says or whoever is in charge. So it's for any European, because we are UK based, it's not far for Central Europe, make sure to visit East Europe as well. BTC Prague, you mentioned it before, and a couple of them are going there. Those are great venues to talk to Bitcoiners who really seen it all.
Prague is relatively undestroyed. Like Sofia, Bulgaria, there's so many remnants of old the communist era there, and the town is still very ugly because of that. Like there are these huge blocks of
the UFO buildings,
ugly houses. Oh, the UFO building, we went to see that too, and like the history is so tragic there, and you can really see what collectivism can do to a nation, and it's pretty fucking sad.
Yeah,
it is
definitely. Knut, is there anything we have forgot to mention you'd like to add to the discussion, or a tip you would want to give out for those still on the struggle who listen in and going in full Bitcoin?
It's a good question. Well, I could do my old shilling routine. I think I already did that in the beginning, though. You can
We'll
go
have-
to
No,
we have it
surely.
linked anyway.
you can go to bitcoinbook.shop. That will redirect you to the Consensus Network. That's Consensus with a K, where all my books are published nowadays, and they have a lot of translations for all the Bitcoin stuff, and are expanding into other subjects closely related to Bitcoin. So a lot of Mises Institute's books will be there, and so on and so forth. And check out Emeralize app, and Orange Pill app, and my site knutsvanholm.com. That's where I sell all my merch and shit like that. And you find my books there too. And yeah, I'm managing the website myself, so I'm really bad at updating it, but still, the stuff is there.
Perfect. We'll have
Long
everything
gone are
linked.
the days of the Commodore 64s and the Spectrum ZX.
Yeah,
Knut, this is the information age now. We've got to get into it properly.
I know, and yeah, it. The good part about that is like these things, like these Zoom calls and whatnot. That in combination with Bitcoin and social networks is so fucking powerful when you think about it, because you can get to know, you can contact anyone in the world, and you can connect on levels that it simply wouldn't have been possible just 5 years ago. I mean, Zoom was awful before all the lockdowns. It sort of forced that technology to develop faster. And yeah, it's really good now. I mean, get to know other Bitcoiners. That's the best tip I have, I guess, because it's about us. Like, we're the ones that's like chess players should get to know other chess players. That's the same logic. We're the ones that need to do this, and we're the ones that need to orange pill everyone else, and we're the ones that need to start building stuff and selling stuff for Bitcoin, and you know, embracing this wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and the great thing is you don't have to be in it for like 10 years or 2 months. The minute you join, everyone knows you're on the same board, and again, play by the same consensus. So that's the beauty of it all.
Yeah. And whenever you go to a Bitcoin conference and meet other Bitcoiners, or go to a meetup, you know that you're above a certain intellectual threshold, and you can start the conversation at a much more interesting place than just talking about the fucking weather.
Yeah, I put a tweet out the other day. I wish I had the opportunity to MRI scan my brain before Bitcoin and now, just to see if there's any difference.
It would be orange.
It would be orange. Knut, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for being so vulnerable and honest, and sharing your rabbit hole story with us. And thank you for giving us a sneak peek at your upcoming writings. It's much appreciated, and it's given us quite a lot to think about. Thank you once again.
Thanks a lot for having me on, guys. Yeah, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Keep on fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Live long and prosper.